So this week it's a double portion, Mitzvah and Vayelekh, and we can get to that about why these two portions are sometimes together and why sometimes they're on their own. But I'd like to begin with a verse that's near and dear to me, because it's the verse that talks about the mitzvah of writing a Sefer Torah. Right now, I'm 80% done with my sixth Sefer Torah, sixth. So, and already I have plans to write Sefer Torah number 7, number 8, and number 9. People have asked me to write those 3 Torahs. I committed to them. So I have to commit. So I'm very busy with this mitzvah. So let me read the source for it, and then I want to read to you some beautiful comments on it. And after we do this, look at the Dudai Reuven on the portion. And after we look at the Dudai Reuven on the portion, I'd like to do after we looked at the Dudai Reuven, I want to look at Balaturim. There were Moshe Feinstein, so hopefully we'll have time to do everything. So the verse states in Parshas Vayelekh. Now we're jumping to Vayelekh, even though whenever it's a double portion, you have to spend equal time on each one. We've been studying Rashi on the portion. We've been studying the Rashi from Nitzavim. So I don't mind jumping straight to Vayelekh. So the pasuk says, "V'ata kisvu lachem es hashiras." And now it says in chapter 31, verse 19, and now write for yourselves this song, "V'lamda es b'nei Israel," and teach it to the children of Israel. Sima b'fiem, place it in their mouths. Amanti alei ashira zos la'ed b'nei Israel, so that this will be for me. This song will be for me a witness for the children of Israel. What is the pasuk? V'ata kisvu lachem es ashira zos. So Rava taught, Afal pi she'inichu lo avosav l'adam sefer Torah, even though a person's father may have bequeathed to him a Torah scroll, mitzvah l'chtov mishalo. It is a mitzvah for each person to write their own Torah scroll. As it says, Ve'ata kisvu lachem es hashira azos. Now write for yourselves this song. So this is the 613th commandment. Everyone is required to write a Torah scroll. And so that's the first thing we need to remember, that this is a mitzvah. It's a mitzvah. On this incredible work in Rabbi Ben Mintz's library, it's called Chamishe Chumshei Torah in Biur Midrash Halacha, and it's made by Yechiel Mechel Stern. He's a Rav in the neighborhood Ezra's Torah of Jerusalem. And this is what he says. He has this tremendous commentary on it. It was just beautiful. He writes as follows. He's like 2 pages on it, so I'll go over because it's all interesting. So he says, even though the verse is talking about the songs, we might think that this is the song of Azinu. Maimonides already taught that we're not supposed to write a passage from the Torah by itself. So therefore, you're not allowed to just write the passage of Hazinu. So therefore, this is the mitzvah to write the whole Torah scroll. So that's the point. How do we see from here the mitzvah to write the whole Torah scroll? Because it says, now write for yourselves this song. And the next week's portion is a song of Azinu. But my mommy says you can't just write the song of Azinu because you're not allowed to write the Torah scroll in different passages. You have to write basically a whole Torah. You can't just write, for example, on a piece of paper, just the passage of Hazinu. So therefore, the Radvaz writes a different explanation. Radvaz writes that this Torah scroll is called Sefer HaYashar. And the Torah scroll is called the Sefer HaYashar, the book of the upright. And Yashar and Shira, Yashar is like Shira as well. So therefore, when it says Shira, it means the Yashar writes this book. The Marsha in Tractate Nedarim explains that he says it's like this. He says, if we're commanded to write the song of Azinu, to prove to us about the existence of the Torah, for sure we're commanded to write the whole Torah itself. He says, so basically he proves it from a Kal V'chomer. If you have to write just the passage of Azinu to prove that the existence and the power of the Torah, for sure you have to write the entire Torah. And Baal Ksava Kabbalah, Rabbi Mecklenburg, he adds that he says that this is like a sick person, that you give to him like we're giving a prescription. We're not giving the entire protocol. We're just giving the highlights, and that way I'd write this song, but really we have to write the whole Torah. Now some say, and this is based upon the Rosh, that you can fulfill the mitzvah of writing a Torah scroll by purchasing books. And then in order to teach them. But that's what some say. That was the Rosh. And so that's what some say, but that's a minority opinion. And now this is what I loved about Rabbi Yechiel Michal Stern's commentary, is that he goes through the different medieval rabbis who wrote Torah scrolls. And I'm going to read it. He says, Maimonides himself wrote a Torah scroll. Maimonides writes, the Sefer Torah shekatavtiv ani, the Torah scroll that I wrote. He wrote this in chapter 9 of the laws of Sefer Torah, Halacha Yud. And Rameir Halevi Abulafia, a major Rishon, he wrote 2 Torah scrolls, as he brought down, the Meiri brought down. And he says, V'chein ketavtia b'shnei sefer Torah shekatavti latzmi. This is what I wrote in my 2 Torah scrolls. And also that Agos Maimonides is an Ashkenazic commentary on Maimonides. He brought down, behold, I did it like this in the Torah scroll that I wrote. They all talk about how they wrote Torah scrolls. And the Meiri writes, and I strove to write this Torah scroll on a specific type of parchment called Gvil, but I didn't find it. And the Migdal Oz writes, this is the Torah scroll I wrote. And the Radvaz says, again, I saw in the Torah scroll that I wrote that was written by Rabbeinu Shem Tov Gaon. Meaning to say, all these great rabbis were writing Torah scrolls. They weren't just relying upon other Torah scrolls that they bought. And indeed, Rabbeinu Tam also wrote a Torah scroll. Like he says that Rabbeinu Tam and the Ravya, they wrote actually. So they both actually, Rabbeinu Tam and the Ravya wrote Megillas Esther. They wrote scrolls of Esther. I don't know if they wrote a Torah scroll. And the Raukeach, who's Rabbi Lezer of Worms, he died, I think, in the 1230s. He wrote that in his eulogy that he wrote for his wife. He says that he had 40 sewed all of those Torah scrolls together. So he talks about how his wife was participating in the mitzvah of sewing together the Torah scrolls. In fact, I saw an old picture from my brother's, when my brother was a rabbi in Maine. I saw a picture that they used to, whenever they would write a Torah scroll, the women of the community would sew it together by hand. Just give me one moment. And in fact, the Gemara says that if you buy a Torah scroll, that's a beautiful thing. But if you write the Torah scroll yourself, it's like you got it straight from Sinai. And I always think like this, that if the only reason why people don't do this mitzvah anymore, most people, is because they're not taught to. That everybody is not taught to. But if when kids were bar mitzvah, they were given a quill and a bottle of ink and a piece of parchment and said, this is your job as a Jew. This is a mitzvah. Go and do it. I think that more and more of them would do it. But we set the expectation. So let me just pause the recording because I see our dear friends want to ask a question. Okay, so the Rabbi Yechiel Michal Stern asked the question, why is it that people today aren't writing their own Torah scrolls? I mean, some people today are not writing it. Some are. So the reason why he says the reason why many are not fulfilling the mitzvah of writing a Torah scroll, actually, so this is going to give strength to those people who say, I haven't written a Torah scroll. He cites a source to support them, and that's the Sefer Hasidim. The Sefer Hasidim is attributed to Rabbi Yehuda Chassid, two major editions of it, the Bologna edition and the Parma edition. Rabbi Yehuda Chassid was pietistic German. He died in the year 1217. And he writes, because we have limited time, and he says it's more important to give clothing to the poor than to write a Torah scroll. He says, Shalvashas aniyim kodemes l'ksiva sefer Torah. It's more important to dress the poor than to write a Torah scroll. And the Chayei Adam, that's Rabbi Danziger, that's died in the early 20th century. He writes that, he says, supporting Torah study institutions, yeshivot or Jewish schools, that's more important than writing a Torah scroll, because we know that you're allowed to sell a Torah scroll in order to study Torah. So he cites support for why it's more important. And he said, and the Chayei Adam writes, not like the Loka Amon, not like most people who think that Hachoshvim Shektiva Sefer Torah Mitzvah Shem Malamen. Not like most people who think that writing a Torah scroll is a mitzvah where there's nothing more important than it. He said it's not correct. Those people who think the only mitzvah, the most important mitzvah is Torah, is writing a Torah, and that by itself is how you get the world to come, and they don't give enough money to those who study Torah. He says, no, writing a Torah is a mitzvah, but you also have to support the Torah institutions. And he says, he argues with that. And then the Shagas Aryeh says that the reason why people are not writing Torah scrolls today is because this is, to my mind, the weakest argument, is he writes, because we are not experts today in how to do it in the letters, and so therefore we can't fulfill this mitzvah. That to me is the weakest, because we certainly can fulfill it just as well as we can fulfill other mitzvahs. So the strongest arguments are Sefer Hasidim, who says other things are more important. And that was the Sefer Hasidim's argument. But the bottom line is that it's a mitzvah to write it, and people should be doing it. So when I started writing a Torah scroll, people questioned me. Like people said, some people when I was Rabbi Bashul, some people said to me, what does writing a Torah scroll have to do with being a rabbi? That's what people would say to me. Right? And I'm saying, this is a mitzvah. This is what you have to do. You have to write a Torah scroll. It's a mitzvah from the Torah to do. So anyway, so it's a great mitzvah. And what's a reward for doing this mitzvah? So the Sefer Yesod Shorosh Avoda writes that in the merit of this mitzvah, you'll be blessed with a long life. So that was his, and he proves it from the Torah scroll, from the fact that a king has to write a Torah scroll, and that's his discussion. So in addition to the mitzvah of writing a Torah scroll, they say as like an attenuated law that derives from it is there's a mitzvah to write down your novel interpretations of the Torah and to publicize them. So if anybody here has new thoughts or creative thoughts about the Torah, it's a mitzvah for you to write them down and to share them with other people. And nowadays, it's free to do this. You could just create it on like a TikTok, Instagram, a Twitter, or excuse me, there's no Twitter, an X, a Facebook, or a website, and just publish your Torah thoughts. You should do that. This is a mitzvah. And the Meiri writes that writing down your thoughts is not just reserved for the wisest people in the generation, but everybody should do it. If you have interesting Torah thoughts, share them and write them down. Share your teachings so that other people can be inspired by your teachings. You can publish it in a magazine. You can publish it wherever you can publish it, but it's a very beautiful thing to do, and it's a mitzvah that's a derivative of this. And the introduction. Hold on. Yeah, so somebody wrote to me that the Torah scroll was about teaching adults and children, bring them closer to Torah. Yeah, for sure. That's the essence of it. The Sefer HaChinuch says that when we write a Torah scroll, why do we each have to write one, even if we have one? It's because the whole process is including people in the process of Torah study and keeping it in our home. Like nowadays, more and more people are having the Torah scroll in their own home. In their own home, they're having Torah scrolls. the Zohar Kodesh says that from the day the temple was destroyed and the sacrifices were canceled, all that God has now are words of the Torah. The words of the Torah that become new in God's mouth. And so it says in the Midrash, Shochar Tov, that if a person sins, he could bring a sacrifice, but today we don't bring sacrifices anymore. So what now we should do is write down everything we learned, and that's like a personal offering. So that's the idea, that nowadays, if we can't write a Torah scroll, and we should write our own novel ideas. Before I wrote a Torah scroll, I used to publish books, but now I say I'm writing the most important book of all, the Torah scroll. It can't get better than that one. It's even been translated a few times. It's been published. It's had a pretty good run so far. The Machzor Vitri was 11th century Ashkenaz. He says that there's a custom. He says minhag achar milah. There's a custom after circumcision. Okay, so this is a circumcision, a bris custom. That what they would do is soon afterwards they would gather together a minyan. They would take a chumash, and they would take the child, the baby boy, in his crib, wearing the garments he wore at the bris, and they would put a book on top of him, or maybe a Torah scroll, and they would make a blessing. Let this baby fulfill that which is written in here. And then they would place a quill and a pen, a quill and an ink in his hand. And they would place the quill and the ink in the baby's hands. And so he should say, may quickly grow up to be a scribe. What do you think about that custom? We could do this next time there's a bris. Basically, take a Torah scroll, put it on the baby, give him a quill and give him a quill and an ink and some ink, and say, may you fulfill that which is written in this, and may you quickly grow up to be a scribe. Reb Chaim Pelagi writes that he saw by himself tremendous miracles that happened when he wrote his Torah scroll. And Rabbi Shlomo Kluger wrote 25 years before he died that he has 115 books and responsa that he needs to write. Okay, so anyway, all this is about the power of the mitzvah of the Torah scroll, of writing a Torah scroll, of being involved in the mitzvah. Let me just pause for a moment and see if anybody has any questions. If you have questions, raise your hand here. Hold on, Nancy is here in person, so let me just stop the recording.